Hey everybody, and welcome to another Bitcoin Core Review Club where we will be reviewing one Bitcoin Core PR. And today we have another P2P networking changes, and it's quite an interesting change. It talks about a bit of different kinds of address connections, network connections, and whitelisting some of them. So Stratosphere will be hosting us today and taking us through the notes and questions. And thank you, Stratosphere, for coming up with the notes and questions. This is also the first time we are doing a review club, which is not, which is where the notes and the questions were not taken from the IRC club. This is Stratosphere wrote herself, and so thanks a lot for taking this up. Okay, Stratosphere, the stage is yours.
Yeah, great. So today we're going to look at how we are going to whitelist connections. So before we go into any of this, like what is whitelisting? Anyone wants to give it a shot?
So the idea is we are going to give certain special kind of permissions to certain specific peers, and which are not permitted. Certain actions which are not permitted for to other peers. So this we do that by marking that connection whitelist and then setting some permission flags to them. If I understood
Yeah,
correctly.
exactly. So why would we want to give some peers special permissions?
Hmm. Yeah, maybe like we can have situations where we know this peer, we know they are maybe run by us in another server, and we want to have special messages flowing through them. In those cases, like, yeah, like as
Yeah,
an
yeah,
individual node operator, I never like felt the need to whitelist anyone, but in some business cases might make sense. I don't know.
yeah, kind of. Like, for example, Bloom filters,
Right.
if you want to enable that. That's kind
Right.
of the, yeah, go on.
Yeah, so like in case of bloom filters, it's like the idea is like your node bloom filters are costly to serve, so your node will like serve um, only to specific known peers. That maybe you are a service provider and you have like apps running in your mobile, and you want those apps to connect to you in those kind of situations. Anyway, let's carry on.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, the idea is like, as you said, like all these circles are nodes, and there are mainly two kinds of connections in the peer-to-peer network. Like if this is me, if you start a connection, this is called an outbound connection, and if this black circle is me, so if there is a connection to me, then that's an inbound connection because I'm receiving it. So before this PR, like you could give special permissions to inbound peers. Like you could tell, like this inbound peer could give Bloom filters. I would never ban this inbound peer, and special permissions were possible for inbound peers, but they were not possible for outbound peers. So this PR introduces special permissions even for outbound peers. So that's what this PR is about. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Uh-huh. But okay, maybe we'll go into these questions later on. But then I had this question is like, why differing between inbound and outbound? Why not just whitelist anybody?
Yeah, like that was my question too. I asked that in the PR.
Okay,
Uh,
cool.
but I think
Yeah.
there is, yeah, anyone wants to give it a shot?
So like
Let's see.
only difference between inbound and outbound is who initiates the connection, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was also my question. Why was it?
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah, like you can think of it in two ways. Like if you are creating an outbound connection, you are kind of privileged in some ways because your IP address kind of has a permanent, like it's kind of persistent if we are an outbound connection, right?
What do you mean by that?
Okay,
Um,
so Yeah, so this black thing is me. So, and I'm creating outbound connections. So, like, supposing my IP address is uh, is not permanent. Like, I could have different IP addresses.
Right. Yeah.
It's possible, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so if I start an outbound connection to some other peer and give that peer's very special permissions, my IP address uh, kind of takes a permanent situation. Like there is some nitty gritty details in the code
Okay.
base where some kind of addresses, I think I2P addresses, they kind of took a permanent state when you did outbound connections.
Okay. So they are
Some,
like somewhere inside the code base there are some differentiations going on between inbound and outbound and they are treated differently.
yeah. Then there's another kind of thing you could say, like, in Bitcoin Core code base, how many? Like, yeah, there are 125 connections and 8 of which are outbound.
Right.
So, uh, if it's not manual and if it's just outbound connections, automatic outbound connections, the chance of coming up with the same pair again is pretty less.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Like you have to make a manual connection to actually get the same pair. Like if you trust a pair, obviously you have to make a manual connection.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
like for example, if this is me and I trust a pair, and
Then
if I
I'll do
make an
like
outbound
add node
connection,
to my node and like make a connection to that person. Right. And
yeah, and
that will
that's a
be an
manual
outbound
connection.
connection from me.
Yeah, it's a manual outbound connection.
Okay.
But
Mm-hmm.
if I am the peer and if it's an inbound connection, like if this is me and I'm an inbound connection, that means somebody else did an add node to me,
Okay.
and
Right.
and this is automatic for me. It's not manual, but automatic for me,
Okay.
and it's also inbound.
Okay. And in these
So this,
cases, we were allowed to add permissions to this external peer who is connecting to me.
yeah, this is the kind of situation before the PR where we gave special permissions.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Then I guess like we can go to the next question. I think this like goes on to the summary of the peer, and the next question is how does this peer do that? Uh, the second one,
Well, what does this PR do?
we kind of like discussed it, but also
Yeah.
like what exactly the peer try, how the peer tries to solve this. Maybe we want to go for that part just in a summary.
Like the code details.
Not the code details, just the
Oh,
concept of like just if you can give a 2, 3, 5 line summary of like how the peer solve this, like what exactly is being um, transferred or like what is being like
yeah.
newly made. Um, there
Yes.
are like a few new changes by this PR.
Yeah. So the thing is, yeah, we again talked about the two main types of connections. There is outbound connections and inbound connections. Those are the two main categories. So in outbound connections, like you start outbound connections using a function called what creates. Yeah, this one creates a node from accepted socket.
Right. Yeah.
And this is how you create outbound connections. But inbound connections you create using another function called connect node.
Okay.
So this connect node already had the code for whitelisting inbound connections. So basically what this PR does is it generalizes some code and uses those functions even in the outbound code case, which is create node from accepted connection. Like for example,
Right. So they
Wait,
here in
sorry.
this commit, like there is a refactor is going on. So there was some logic inside some other function. I think create
Yeah,
node from accepted socket, the one you just showed, and there was some permission flags were being set by some if logic, and that got extracted out into this new function called initialize permission flags. I think we'll go into initialize permission flags in details later, but yeah,
yeah.
that's like the main logic that is being refactored.
I think I said something wrong. Create node from accepted socket. I think it's for inbound. I
Right, but that's the thing that you showed first.
yeah,
Yeah. So that is like for okay, so that's for inbound connections. Create a node from a source accepted, and yeah, this is an inbound connection constructor, right? That's what the doc suggests.
yeah. So this was already there in inbound, and they took it out and made a new function, and then they will use this function inside the code for outbound connections.
Right, makes sense. This one is a bit I guess what it's happening is like this initialize permission flag. This is again another nitty gritty details. There was like another chunk of code that used to set the service flags from the permission flags itself, and that is only applicable for Bloom filter. So that part of the code got added again into this um, previous function. Maybe it could should have gone into the previous commit itself, but they
Yeah,
made the change in the
they ju-
commit.
they just took this thing inside initialize permission flags. It's
Right.
just a refactor one.
Yeah. And then adding this new definition into net.h. Yeah. This one is
Yeah,
straightforward. I think the next one is like yeah quite big and there's a lot of changes. We might not want to go too much details into this one.
yeah. This one is adding those into, yeah, see, connect node is what is for outbound connections. So they are using those functions we saw before, initialize permission flags inside connect node.
Right.
And yeah, like having options for setting permission flags and doing all those kind of changes.
Right. So somewhere they had this new variable called yeah vector whitelist range outgoing. So there is a new vector of net whitelist permission. Yeah, exactly where your cursor is right now. And they added
Yeah.
this new vector, which is like a range of list of addresses which are whitelisted. Is that the purpose of this thing? I'm not exactly sure.
Uh, it's a vector of net whitelist permissions. What is
Hmm.
net whitelist permissions?
I think net whitelist permission is basically enum that sets different permission flags. And yeah, and I think this is up like this net permission flag. This is a base class of that thing, and that thing, this C net permission flags, also has another item called C subnet, M subnet.
Ah,
This M subnet is an address of a peer, so this is per peer basis permission flags.
makes sense.
I
Yeah,
hope so.
you're right.
Like it seems
Yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah, right.
So we have a vector of that. One of them is called vector whitelisted, and another is newly added called vector whitelisted outgoing. And so my one of my question was while I was looking at the code is like maybe it makes sense for to make the vector whitelisted range into vector whitelisted incoming because we already have an outgoing. So
Yeah, that would be more clear to us when we are reading the code.
yeah, could be a review comment. Anyway, let's move ahead. That's I think like enough of the. Or you want a few things to cover over there on the approach of the peer?
Anyone has any questions? We just move on to the next one then.
Yep.
Yeah. What are net permissions flag? What are net permission flags? How is it set? When do we set net permission flags implicit?
So, anyone wanna give a shot at it? Okay, so let me try. Net permission flags are like basically a byte flag. So it's a byte array of like, and different bits are set, and each bit set signals certain kind of permissions that the connecting that the opponent PR is allowed to do with us. So, and there are like bloom filters, relays, force relays, downloads. No ban means like we cannot ban that PR. Address means like this PR can send us a lot of addresses, and there are some privacy preserving cache that is bypassed. So these are like the different kind of permissions which are set for different nodes. And by implicit permission, it means like whenever we are like not setting the permissions manually in a granular basis, then it goes with implicit. And implicit means like it has some default permissions, and somewhere in the code I saw like what are those defaults are, but I don't know if I can find it. But yeah, so that's what implicit means in context of net permission.
Yeah, you're right. It's a no ban and mempool. So yeah, so this is again how that byte, the vector would look like, the byte vector. So its uint 32. So that means it's 32 bits,
Right,
0, 1, 2, 3 up to 31. So 0 is none, 1 means bloom filter, 3 means relay, force relay is 2 or 3.
right,
So all those things will be there, and 31 is that implicit thing.
right.
So
So
normally what
we have
happens
up
is,
to how many bytes already flagged? Like how many bytes are used by the flags? The last one is 7. So yeah, first 8
yeah,
bytes are used by the flag. Okay, makes sense.
yeah. Yeah, and also how we normally whitelist pairs is what? Yeah, there will be this bitcoin.conf file,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, right? Like you will write whitelist
Right,
is equal to, and then whatever permissions you want from here, like no ban and relay maybe,
yeah, and then the
and
IP
then
address of that.
yeah, you would write an at and the IP address in the along with all the other Bitcoin configurations.
Right,
So that's how you normally write. But implicit means you just write
the IP
whitelist
address of it.
equals IP address.
Yeah, so it will automatically derive like whatever is the default permissions and apply it to that IP.
Yeah. So before, like this change is actually introduced by this guy. He's
Okay.
from Bitcoin Pay server, right?
Yeah, this is BTCP server Nicholas Dorier.
Yeah. He made this pair. So before this, all these different kinds of permissions were not there. Like this force relay, no ban, mempool, all these were not there.
Okay.
So, so the legacy behavior was if you write whitelist is equal to some IP address, the legacy behavior was it would have no ban and mempool permissions for that pair.
Okay.
And then additionally, if you set stuff like force relay, if you use whitelist force relay and white relay, then those whitelist force relay and white relay permissions would be applied.
Right.
Bi- so that means like you're using more stuff in the config file, like whitelist for force relay is true,
Right.
things like that. So that was the legacy behavior, and Nicholas he wanted to introduce bloom filters.
Mm-hmm.
Like bloom filters, somewhere they yeah, in 0.19 version of Bitcoin, bloom filters were disabled by default, right? So he
Hmm.
wanted an option to
Enable the
be able
bloom
to
filter
serve.
again, only to some
Yeah,
peers that he wants to connect to.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Okay.
So that's how this all these different permissions came, and implicit was something to preserve the default legacy behavior,
Okay.
and
That's an
and that is
interesting
what,
historical note.
yeah, and that is what is that, and that is what they moved into this initialize permission flags function.
Okay.
So so if you see this, if like if you look at this, if net permission has flag implicit, then you're going to clear all the existing flags. Supposing you used in the config file whitelist force relay, you're going to add that permission flag. If you had written whitelist relay, you're going to add that permission flag. Otherwise, you add the legacy flags,
Mempool
mempool
and no
and
ban.
noban.
Makes sense. Nice.
And and if you look at like wait, what is this implicit, right? If you look in the code base where net, yeah. So this is where those try pass permission flags is the function where which passes the Bitcoin config.
Right.
Like this stuff, whitelist is no ban, comma relay at IP address. So if you look here, like if at is not found, the caller should apply implicit permission flags.
Okay.
So that's where you're setting implicit. It's not something like if it's mempool and stuff, we will be parsing those permissions from the configuration.
Right.
But this is something which is set by the code.
Okay. Makes sense. So it's like parsing that string. If there is an at, then means like whatever it, at the start of the at was the permissions. If not, then just go ahead with implicit. And when you set permission, then implicit will have its usual meaning, depending on whether white relay or white forced relay is given or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Really nice. So I
Oh,
guess we covered the third question
yeah, we
and
did.
also the fourth question a bit. Net permission. What does this function? So we just went over that function. So you can like go over that again, and we can check another time.
Initialize permission flags.
Yeah. So this is that function that, yeah, so basically this function is straightforward. It's basically, but it's not doing the service flag thing. Okay, probably it's not there in that comment. Yeah, Fractal, go ahead.
So I just wanted to know, like these flags, mempool and no ban, these weren't there before the BTC Pay server guy.
No, it were there. It were like
Okay.
the basic default one, I guess.
Yeah, and the new ones.
I think he added the new ones, which are like the new flags. Net permission.cpp in that comment.
This is a net permissions.h, right? So
Hmm.
let's see what he added. So yeah, apparently he made a whole,
The whole enum itself.
uh, you know. Okay, maybe we should go to the history before this and see if like what were the existing
Yeah.
permissions. How did we do it? He introduced this whole file.
Oh, yeah, right. This file didn't existed before.
Go to this. Should be net or something, right?
Should be.
Okay, what should we search for?
What exactly we're trying to look at, like find for?
Uh, like we know the default permissions were mempool and no ban. So how did they do that then?
Okay. I think that's will be there in the commit of the Nicholas Dorier spear. So we had that open. No, not this spear. The Nicholas Dorier one.
I closed it. So he introduced this. He changed totally how all these permissions came. Like he introduced that whole new file. Maybe he has written somewhere here. If no permissions is
Yeah, no
specified,
ban and
no ban.
mempool is assumed, making this PR backward compatible. So that was the default one previously. No ban and mempool, and I think like that's also like the default one now. Also, like if you don't put white relay and whitelist force relay, then as per that logic of that function, um, then only the mempool and no ban will be set, right?
Yeah.
I think we should trace back a bit and not go too far. I think also like it seems like it's the default behavior is also the same without any
Yeah.
other permissions. Implicit seems to be at current master also only implying no ban and uh, no ban and
Mempool.
mempool. Yeah,
Mm.
but they might have like different ways of doing it. This net permission flag enum was introduced, seems like was introduced in this PR.
Yeah. So before they, oh yeah, they had some enum before some bind flags, and they had a bind flag called whitelist, which should do the default permissions we said.
Okay,
Is but bind. Oh yeah, we still have bind flags now apparently.
okay, but some of the flagging of from there has been moved to this one.
Yeah, we removed that. Yeah, so
Whitelist. Yeah.
does that make sense? Yeah,
Yeah.
before bind flag whitelist meant what no ban and mempool, and now we have removed it and made it a whole new enum with more flexible options for whitelisting.
Makes sense.
Yep.
We'll go to the next question.
Yep, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, whitelist only allows to add permission flags to inbound peers. Why only for inbound ones?
Right, it's that question we talked about. Anybody wanna take a shot at it? Why do you guys think like it's only for inbound ones? Um,
So I think the BTC Pay person wanted to use Bloom filters for inbound connections. So he made the PR just for that. What do you think?
Yeah, that's true. That is very true.
yeah, Right. So he just applied the whole logic to inbound connections only because yeah, his node will be get connected to some clients maybe, and the node will only have to whitelist inbound connections. That's a very good answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I also couldn't find any like substantial reason of like why not having outbound whitelisting.
This peer isn't merged, or is it?
Yeah, it's merged a lot long
Okay.
ago. It's a very old one.
Oh, okay, okay.
2019, 5 years ago. So previously, what we had was like only inbound could get uh, whitelisted. Now we are having outbounds also getting whitelisted. So anybody know the rationale behind like why the reason they started talking about having whitelisted outbounds?
Remember, we discussed this in one of the earlier discussions as well. So it can be to avoid eclipse attacks. That's like one of the reasons. But there can be other reasons as well, right?
Right. Yeah. Stratus, do you think like it has
Oh,
effect on this kind of attacks?
oh, could you explain more? I didn't understand fully.
So remember, in one of the peer reviews, we discussed how eclipse attacks work.
Yeah.
And then if there are certain whitelisted connections, so
Oh,
that
oh.
avoids the eclipse attacks for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Also, this whitelisting is very related to authentication. Like, if ever we want, like, we usually would do whitelisting with trusted peers, right?
Right.
Maybe some scenarios, I don't know. Maybe there might be use cases where you would whitelist.
But mostly for trusted scenarios, yeah. But what you were saying
Yeah.
for identification or authentication?
Yeah, I think BIP 151, Jonas Snelly's one, which isn't active anymore, that
Hmm.
is kind of about how we could do authentication for, like, if you're a node operator managing both peers, you might want to authenticate also the connection between both peers. Like
Right.
here, right now, when we're whitelisting a peer, like we are assuming it really is the peer. We have no way to authenticate that we are really communicating with that peer itself.
Okay. So you're saying like whitelisting should be always done with authentication also, like,
Yeah, future edition.
or maybe like can it be a net permission flag?
Yeah, like yeah, like we need permission flags to tell what kind of permissions
Right. So it will be a new kind
we
of
give.
permission where the PR is allowed to authenticate with us.
I guess I was thinking more like we should have authentication always for any whitelisted peer. And then on top of that, you could kind of tell which all permissions you want that whitelisted authenticated peer to have. Like
Hmm.
you can query its mempool. You can not ever ban it, stuff like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that does make
Just
sense. Yeah. Whitelisting should go hand in hand with authentication. We need to know like which PR or the intended PR is the right PR or not. That does make sense. But yeah, I think like with BIP 325, it's going to come also like some nodes will going to have authenticated connection with each other.
24.
No, 324, right? Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Do we have any more to cover on this question?
No, but regarding
Also,
to, oh yeah, go on.
so isn't like Bitcoin Core giving heavy penalties if there is some issue in the packets and all? So if you are sure it's our node, it would be good to I guess give the no ban permission to those IPs.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that is a useful use case. Especially, yeah. Actually, this is a very good point because uh, this permissions like no ban, it's used in private networks. Like
Right.
firewalls, for example, they could flip bits accidentally, and
Hmm.
when you flip bits accidentally, the misbehavior score of the peer increases,
Right.
and then it's very possible that the peer gets dropped. So if you put a no ban connection in those situations, you
Right.
will still always be connected.
Yeah, those kind of like special private situations, whitelisting makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The other situations where you can whitelist a non-trusted peer.
Hmm. Yeah, like you can, like, there is no way to authenticate it right now. So the code doesn't care whether you are whitelisting a malicious peer or not.
Okay, and back to the other point you made, the 324 doesn't allow authentication for a peer. It only does packet authentication.
Okay, so
So,
the handshake authentication doesn't happen.
no, that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Like you get yeah, there is no authentication. It's only encryption. Authentication would be done in a future proposal. But we
Okay.
do authentication of each individual packet.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Hmm. So like, yeah, like still like handshake authentication and identifying we're talking with the correct peer or not is like bit far ahead in the roadmap.
Yeah.
No, I have a question. Like, should we authenticate? So authentication means we are confirming that it is a person. So isn't that against privacy? Like we should, the
Exactly.
same node should be able to send with different IPs, right?
Yeah, so that's yeah, that's the situation. So there is no, like right now Bitcoin network does not have encryption nor does it have authentication. And as you said, authentication doesn't make sense in the current peer-to-peer networks situation because you consider all peers as kind of equal in a way, except whitelisted peers. But these are again power user options. I don't think a normal person would go and whitelist a peer.
Mm-hmm.
For an
Yeah.
ordinary node user, most nodes are the same, and there is no special, like you shouldn't favor one node over the other. But there are very special scenarios where you would want to authenticate. Like if you are a node operator and managing both nodes, then you would definitely, you would like authentication would be a useful feature to have, but not for
The
the
generic P2P network.
yeah, the whole network. That would be very bad.
Mm.
That's why we have a proposal right now for encryption, but not for authentication.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Right. Because in the P2P network is like a horizontal topology, and adding authentication um, might like cause those kind of hierarchies also. I don't know. Um,
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
there any proposal for that for this thing which is already floating out, like for authentication, that anyone can read, or
I
it's
think
just
the big proposal of the whole P2P encryption thing also included authentication first, but now probably it doesn't.
okay?
yeah. Jonas Snelly had one BIP 151. I think it's 151, but now it's not. I mean, there are some issues with it. Like you need a better authentication proposal. So maybe after this encryption gets merged and it's actually being used, then we can think about authentication and
How about login
like
with Google?
But it will be the same kind of authentication that will be used in Lightning Network. So that is already used in Lightning Network. It's like the Diffie-Hellman handshake of two public keys. And
Oh,
yeah, so it's not like you'll be subscribing to a service provider or something. Your node will have a public key, just like how it happens in Tor in other places also. Um, I'm not sure like how much hierarchy it's going to provide, because in Lightning Network it's like all nodes have authentication, and
oh,
so it's like knowing the by the computer. Now the computer knows like it's talking to the right node, or the node that it started talking to in the first place, and no new node changed over and did any kind of things that is fishy. So that's the benefit of authentication. And yeah, so
Uh, so in Lightning, like I think you have to find the fastest path, right? So there we need authentication, right, to know which is the path to send. Or am I
no,
getting
not
confused?
for the fastest path. So this will be a little bit side topic, but in Lightning, we have two kind of connections. One is gossip connection, where we are not authenticating and just like gossiping data around, just like we do in Bitcoin Core. And then there are authenticated connection to our channel partners. Those are the connections only which are authenticated. So all the channel partners have with each other authenticated connections, and the routing data comes from the gossip network. So in the gossip network you have like all the updates floating around, and the node tries its best to gather all the updates and create the graph and try to find the root over there. You don't need authentication for the route. You need authentication to know that your channel partner hasn't been like maliciously transformed into something else while its IP address remains the same.
Ah, okay, okay.
interesting.
Okay, let's move ahead with the questions. I think we covered this one quite well. Does it make sense to extend the permission to outbound peers? Why? Um, my 2 cents will be, I think it makes sense. And we might have like special cases situations where we want to connect and initiate an outbound connection with special permissions. So having whitelisting on outbound makes sense. And I think also the part of this question or the next question, I don't remember, was like, what's the point of like two type of connections in and out at the same time? What happens when it's
Yeah,
both?
yeah. We head on to the next one.
Oh, that's the next one, I think. Yep, let's move ahead to the next one then. So
Okay,
connection
connection
direction
direction.
can be both in and out. What does both mean? What happens? Try permission flag if it's none. In which scenario can this happen? I think third part of the question we can look into some code. And both means like while setting the permission, don't care whether it's an inbound connection or an outbound connection. Just if you find that IP address, um, allow that permissions to that node, whether it's inbound or outbound. So maybe for the cases where you don't know whether that particular node will be inbounded or outbounded.
Huh? What?
Sorry, did it make sense?
Wait,
Uh,
can you say that again? I don't think I understood.
Okay, so both means like setting the network connection direction like in or out. It means like both in and out is set. So what this
Yeah.
will do is like this connection depending on this connection direction, this net permission flag will be set into those vectors, those net permission whitelist vectors inside net.cpp we saw somewhere. I think Connection Manager has this thing.
Ah, okay. I thought this was like one way to like get node count. If you do both, that means you're going to count both inbound and outbound connections.
Oh no, that's one use case of it. But the use case over here in our context is like when the connection direction is both Like
Ah,
it's set into those two particular vectors where the net permission flag vectors are set for each addresses. I think we saw that part of the code also a few minutes ago.
oh, the one you showed, the two vectors.
Yeah, where the new
Okay.
vector is being added. So depending on what's the direction, this net permission will go and set into that particular vector.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
So I think it will be net.cpp. Um, Let me try to find it also. Sorry. This is happening in init.cpp. So it's in the initialization file. In init.cpp, if you go to, you have might have to go to mm, yeah, this guy. So connection direction, and then it's reading the connection direction. Try parts will take the string and
Hmm.
take the subnet and connection direction. And if the connection direction is inbound, then it will push into the previous list, vector whitelisted range. And
Yeah,
if the connection is outbound, then whitelisted range outgoing will be pushed. So for both cases, it will be pushed into both the vectors.
yeah, yeah. That's true. Makes sense.
Yes, and then both the vectors will then have like the rest of the checking will be done accordingly. And um, if the permission is found in outbound, then and so that will also apply. I guess that's how it works after that.
I think one question I asked in the peer was why do we need separate permissions for inbound and outbound if it's the same peer we are talking to?
That's the question I also had. And
Yeah.
yeah, if it's the same period, then just have one list where. But then again, you will end up having two lists anyway. A fractal,
How?
see you later.
Trifactor.
Yeah, so the question was like, even in case like, I guess like the reason is like you will end up having two vectors anyway. Because um, inbound permissions are handled differently and outbound permissions are handled differently in different places. So you have to have a logical segregation between inbounds and outbounds in terms of like the vector of permission flags. So you can do various things. You can do say this is my vector for inbounds, this is my vector for outbounds, and together it combines and gives us all the permissions that I have. Or you can do like total, like this is my vector of total and this is my vector of inbound, or this is my vector of outbound. And, but in any cases you will end up maintaining two lists anyway. Does that make sense, or I'm missing something?
Oh, like, are you talking about those two, like how outbound connections are handled? That
Yeah,
open accepted connection something and connect node. Like
yeah,
both of them will use two different lists.
yeah,
Is
they
that what
will
you're
use
saying?
two different lists. Yeah, either you have to like give them like process the list and give them it, or like you have to store the list in two different containers. And just by putting it into one container will not do, because you have two different functions calling different kinds of connections.
Two different call. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
So for the same peer, can we give different permissions for inbound and outbound? We can't, right? Because whitelist, the config,
Hmm.
we can only give the
But
same, right?
we can provide two separate configuration, for one permission set for inbound, then another permission set for outbound, right? I think nothing stops us from doing that. We can repeat the IP addresses as many times. So in one line we'll write whitelist this permission inbound IP this, and next line whitelist this permission outbound IP this. Should work. I don't know.
Yeah, this is also what I asked in the PR. Like, what, like what would happen if you give different permissions in different connection directions? And I asked him for tests. Did he do it? I didn't check after that.
Yeah, but the tests are also like it seems like the test could be more categorized a bit more. Like this also includes a refactor inclusion that like affects all the files. So maybe it would make sense to do the refactoring in another peer and just traced out the behavior of this particular change into one test. Maybe she is doing that also, but I couldn't find it in the all the change files.
I wanted a test where you could just check different permissions, different directions. In P2P permissions.py, what happens?
Hmm.
Just one
Is
test.
there a p2p permissions.py?
Yeah,
Okay. Maybe a behavior test over here. Already there are some whitelisting going on, and no banning and banning is going on. But this file wasn't changed. Like this file wasn't touched in the PR.
it is not.
That's interesting. Hmm. It should, in my opinion.
So there is no coverage check in the PR review, the code coverage.
Code coverage, huh? I don't think so.
No.
Oh, that is not good, right? That is something we should propose. Minimum 80% coverage or whatever.
Hmm. I think so. Uh, but I'm pretty sure people have thought about it before, and there might be some good reason why they don't do it or can't do it. Can we just check in the conversation? If we just go to the conversation and look at the tests, we should see some coverage if it's there. Just go at the bottom, at the very bottom in the test. All checks have passed, show all checks. And
Coverage is not done. I think someone is working on including coverage in the CA.
okay, hmm, that makes sense. Maybe it's work in progress.
Yeah, I saw some discussion. Someone is working on adding coverage, but it's not checked in the
Right, it's
Markov
not.
has. There is some website where you can check coverage, right? Bitcoin coverage dot.
I didn't knew that.
Okay, I don't know either. It's there is some website. Marco Falke hosts it. Okay, I can't find it now.
Okay, maybe if we can find it later, we'll post it in the chat. But this is a good place to also venture to see if there are like contribution opportunities in the coverage segment. And yeah, that probably doesn't require much understanding of Bitcoin code, but will require stuffs on C++, how to do coveraging and all this kind of infrastructure thing.
Yeah. Like if this PR gets merged or gets good reviews, I think if anyone is interested, like they can make a PR.
Yeah, But this PR should include some behavior tests, right? Because we are changing some
Mm.
RPC behaviors, or not RPC, like config behaviors. And maybe there needs to be some tests for that also. Okay, we are at the end mark over here, so let's um, cover it up. And any more last moments that we want to discuss? What happens if try permission flag is none? We didn't check this one. This one seems interesting. What happens when the try permission flag is none? I think I saw that somewhere. Trying to find it again.
So that is like not whitelisting the peer, no?
Sorry.
So if it's none, that means it's like not whitelisting the peer, right?
Let me check what does flags and null pointer, and connection direction is none. So what happens when the connection direction is none? So uh, I'm also trying to figure out. Um,
Oh, it's default in. Oh, so it's on line 74.
on which file? Netpermissions.cpp.
So I think this connection direction NM flags get set like when you're parsing stuff. So like we talked about how in the Bitcoin config file we would add permissions like mempool, no ban, stuff like that. Like that, one more thing this PR talks is for adding permissions like in and out. Is there some example there?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Yeah, so
Okay.
like we talked about how there is permissions like no ban, mempool, in and out.
Mm-hmm.
So in this PR, another thing which happens is this in and out are also new permissions, kind of like which get parsed.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't talk about this. So here we talked about like no ban relay. So if you want to specify for inbound special permissions, you would write in,
Right.
and if you want it for out also, you would write out.
Right.
I think you write both. I don't know. We have to check the code. So this is also something which is parsed in bitcoin.conf. So when it gets parsed, where is it parsed? In that other function we saw.
It's passing in netpermission.cpp line number 24.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
So when it gets passed, like before all the permissions, like if it's Bloom filter all, you would add flags into net permissions. So when you pass in, you would like if you have specified in connection direction, you would add this connection direction in
Hmm.
flag.
Hmm.
It's not to net permissions, but to connection direction.
Hmm.
It's the two different things. And if you have specified out, you would like what or it took connection direction. So if you have not specified both in and out, connection direction would be none in the beginning. So when you say like it's none, what you mean is that you have not specified both in or out. It's
Mm-hmm.
being whitelisted, but you did not specify both in or out.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So but then by default, if it's none, connection direction is none, then connection direction equals to connection direction in. Can you see that line number 74 on the same file?
Yeah, because that's legacy behavior.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. So by default, you're setting it to in a case like when this is a null pointer, when connection direction is null pointer, and then we will have connection direction none, and
yeah,
in then it will be set into in, like
yeah,
connection direction in incoming. And
Yeah.
this null pointer is being parsed in net whitebind permission try pause that is happening in net permission.cpp with a null pointer, and then net permissions try pause. So sorry, I'm looking at net permission.cpp line number 120. Or if you just search with try parse permission flags, the name of the function, it's just only used 3 times.
Oh, it's try line 120 line.
Yeah, like try parse permission flags. That's the function. Yeah,
Oh,
this function. Just search for this function and see what places are it's being used, the call sites of them. And there in the second case, you will see like there's the null pointer. It's being called with a null pointer. And this is happening inside net whitebind permissions.
net
And
white permissions. Okay. And net whitelist permissions. Yeah.
yeah. And in whitelist permission, we are only concerned about direction. In whitebind, we don't care about directions.
Yeah. Pipeline means you're like listening at some address, and whatever peers connect to you at that address, it automatically gets those
Those permissions.
permissions.
Right, yeah. Makes sense. So there you don't need directions, and all the peers will be connected to there. So putting it null pointer makes it input, like inbound connections.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, cool. That clears this one up. So if no more questions, we will conclude.
One
Yep, go
one
ahead.
question from me. Bloom filters are uh, basically things that are computationally expensive, right?
Hmm.
So it makes sense to whitelist inbound connections, but why are we whitelisting outbound Bloom filters?
Not only whitelisting outbound Bloom filters, we are whitelisting any general outbound connections. And I think the reason for that is for those kind of special situations and cases where you wanna connect to a particular peer, and you know that peer is like trusted peer and is reliable and stuffs. Not only just Bloom filters. Maybe you will not
Yeah,
only use Bloom filters from that peer, but you wanna give
right.
special permission to that guy.
So my question was like, do we need all permission flags for outbound? We might only need no ban and a few of them, right?
Depends on like what you wanna do. Like you might wanna like give only the download permission flag to an outbound connection. You might wanna give a forced relay permission flag to an outbound connection. Right. So not only no ban and the other stuffs. You might wanna granularize what kind of connection you wanna give to the outbound.
Okay. So like all of the permission flags are applicable to both.
All of the
So I think I
permission
have to
flags
go.
are applicable to both. Yeah. And
The
if
Okay.
you
only
don't
Okay.
set any
Just
difference,
permission, it will be implicit.
yeah, the only difference between an inbound and outbound pair is who initiates the connections. After that, everything you talk is the same. It doesn't matter. Like the
Right.
only difference is who initiates.
Mm-hmm.
After
Yeah.
that, you'll all talk at same bandwidth or transmit whatever messages. It doesn't. Only that starting point is different.
Right. So, like for most
oh,
of the same reasons, like inbound, how whitelisting would make sense. I think outbound whitelisting will also make sense.
Yeah.
okay, okay, got it. So I had the confusion. Okay, so only the starting, basically the constructor is like different. Okay.
Yeah.
Who initiates the connection? That's
Yeah, yeah,
all the
okay, got it.
difference between inbound.
Okay. Any more questions? We can also like carry on the discussion if you have like few more questions, and we can like share around resources in the chat. And I will also like try to review this PR and put some comments. And if I do, I'll share the link in the chat also.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for joining, guys.